The wind screamed like a wounded animal, clawing at the window pane of Maya's tiny apartment. She pulled her thin blanket tighter, trying to ignore the cold that seeped through the cracks in the wall. The flickering light of the television showed images of the worst snowstorm in decades, but her attention was on the last few dollars in her wallet. A frantic, desperate pounding on her door shattered the silence. Her heart leaped into her throat. No one visited her, especially not on a night like this. Fear, cold and familiar, gripped her. The last time she'd trusted a stranger, she'd ended up robbed and heartbroken. She crept to the door, peering through the peephole. A man, his coat dusted white with snow, stood hunched over, cradling a small bundle. "Please." His voice was raw, torn away by the wind. "My daughter. She's sick. Our car died a block away. Just for an hour, until the worst passes." Maya's hand froze on the deadbolt. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to let them pass. But then the bundle in his arms shifted, and she saw a small, pale face, her eyes glassy with fever. A memory, warm and solid amidst the cold, surfaced. Her grandmother's voice, "Baby, when someone needs help and you can give it, you give it. Don't let fear make you small." With a shuddering breath, she turned the lock and opened the door. A blast of icy air rushed in. The man stumbled over the threshold, his gratitude palpable. Thank you so much. I'm Leo, and this is Sophia." "Maya," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She led them to her worn-out sofa, fetching her last clean towel and the meager remains of her first aid kit. She moved quietly, her own worries about rent and food momentarily silenced by the sight of the shivering child. She warmed some canned soup on her single-burner hot plate. "It's not much," she said, handing a bowl to Leo. He took it as if it were a 5-course meal. "It's everything." He tried to spoon-feed Sophia, his hands trembling with a mixture of cold and fear. Maya watched them, the careful way he brushed the hair from his daughter's forehead, the whispered words of comfort. This wasn't a threat. This was a father, just like any other, terrified for his child. The last of her defenses crumbled. "You can have my bed," she said softly. "She'll be more comfortable there." Leo looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "We can't take your bed." "You can, and you will," Maya said, a flicker of her old strength returning. "She needs proper rest." As Leo settled Sophia into the narrow bed, Maya sat by the window, watching the storm rage. She felt a strange sense of peace amidst the chaos. She had so little, but tonight, she had enough to share. The following morning, the storm had passed, leaving a world of pristine white silence. Sophia was sleeping more peacefully, her fever having broken in the night. Leo stood by the door, looking like a different man composed, his gaze clear and intense. "I can never repay you for this, Maya," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You don't have to," she replied, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just get her home safe." He nodded, then reached into his pocket, not for a wallet, but for a simple, thick-stock business card. He handed it to her. "If you need anything at all, you call that number. It goes directly to me." Maya took the card. It was elegantly understated. "Leo Vance, CEO, Apex Dynamics." Her breath hitched. "A CEO?" She looked from the card to his earnest face, then to the sleeping child in her bed. The pieces didn't fit. "You're a CEO?" "I am," he said. No arrogance in his tone, only a heavy weight. "But last night, I was just a scared dad. You gave us something real, and I owed you something real in return. That card is a promise." After they left, the apartment felt emptier than ever. The silence was no longer peaceful, but oppressive. She looked at the card in her hand, a token from a world she couldn't comprehend. She tucked it into the frame of her grandmother's photograph, a strange souvenir from a night she would never forget. Little did she know, that single card was a key about to unlock a door she never knew existed. Her life of quiet struggle was on the verge of a seismic shift. What would you have done if a stranger knocked on your door in a storm? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're captivated by Maya's journey, don't forget to like and subscribe for the next part. The fragile peace Maya had found shattered in the days that followed. The world outside thawed, but the cold seeped into her life and stayed. First, her elderly client, Mrs. Gable, passed away quietly in her sleep. The loss was a personal ache, but the reality that hit harder was the loss of the income. The agency had no other assignments for her. Then, the final blow came from the diner. "Business is slow, Maya. "We have to cut back," her manager said, not meeting her eyes as he handed her a final, insultingly small envelope. Just like that, both her jobs were gone. The silence in her apartment was no longer just empty, it was accusatory. She spent a week in a fog of frantic job searching, but every door was closed. "We're looking for someone with more specific software experience," or "the position has been filled internally." Her resume, a patchwork of survival jobs, was a ticket to nowhere. Then, the envelopes started arriving. The first was pastel pink, a stark contrast to the gloom it brought. "Final notice before eviction action." The words screamed up at her from the floor where she'd let it drop. Her breath hitched. This was it. The precipice she'd been dancing on for years. A few days later, she came home from another futile interview to a different kind of silence. The hum of the refrigerator was absent. She flicked the light switch. Nothing. The power company had made good on their threat. She stood in the deepening twilight, the cold of the floorboards seeping through her thin shoes. This was more than being poor. This was being erased. Her gaze drifted to the one spot of warmth in the room, her grandmother's photograph. The edges of Leo Vance's business card were visible behind the frame. A CEO, a billionaire. The thought of calling him felt like a physical weight, a humiliation so profound it made her cheeks burn. He'd seen her kindness, but to call him now would be to show him her failure. He'd offered charity, a pity check that would forever color the memory of that night. But as the temperature dropped with the sun, reality became a sharper, more insistent voice. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was about survival. Sophia's feverish face flashed in her mind. That man had been desperate for his child. What would he think of her now, too proud to ask for help when she was drowning? Trembling, more from the internal war than the cold, she pulled the card from its frame. Her fingers were stiff as she typed the number into her cheap, prepaid phone. Each ring was a lifetime of judgment. He picked up on the second ring. Leo Vance. His voice was calm, assured, the voice of a man who had never had his power shut off. Her own voice cracked. "Mr. Vance? It's Maya. Maya Jones. You stayed at my apartment during the storm." There was no hesitation. "Maya, of course. Is everything all right?" The genuine concern in his tone was what broke her. The dam holding back her fear and shame burst. "No," she whispered, a tear finally tracing a cold path down her cheek. "No, everything is not all right. I lost my jobs. The power is off. I have an eviction notice." The words tumbled out, ugly and raw. "I'm so sorry to call you like this. I didn't know who else." "Where are you right now?" he asked, his voice shifting into something decisive, operational. "I'm at home. My apartment is dark. Stay there. I'm on my way. Don't worry about anything, Maya. Just stay there." An hour later, headlights cut through the darkness of her street. She saw his silhouette, taller and more solid than she remembered, getting out of a sleek, dark car. He wasn't alone. Another man began unloading bags from the trunk, groceries, boxes that looked like they contained heaters. When she opened the door, Leo didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with the same intensity he'd had when caring for Sophia. He took in the cold, dark room, the unopened eviction notice on the table, and his jaw tightened. "David," he said to the man with him, "let's get the portable generator hooked up for heat and the fridge, and get these groceries put away." Then he turned to Maya. "We need to talk." He guided her to the diner down the street, the one that had just fired her. They sat in a booth, under the harsh fluorescent lights. He pushed a hot coffee towards her. "Tell me what you're good at, Maya," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Not what jobs you've done. What are you good at?" Confused, she stammered. I don't know. I care for people. I listen. I know how to stretch a dollar until it screams. I know what it's like to have every system stacked against you." Leo Vance leaned forward, his eyes alight. "That's it. That's what I'm investing in." "Investing?" "My company, Apex, has a corporate social responsibility budget. We throw money at problems. It looks good in the annual report, but it doesn't fix anything." He paused. "I want to start a real community program in a neighborhood like Crestview, but I don't need another MBA to run it. I need someone who knows the people, who understands the struggle, who knows that what people need isn't a handout, but a hand up." He was offering her a job, not a one-time check, a job. "The salary is $70,000 a year, with full benefits," he said, as if reading the shock on her face. You would be the director of the Crestview Bridge project. You answer directly to me. You design it. You hire the team. You make the decisions. Maya felt the world tilt. 70,000? It was a number from a different universe. Director? Her? The woman who had just had her power shut off? They'll never respect me, she breathed, the old fear surfacing. They'll think I'm your pet project. Let them, Leo said, his voice firm. You prove them wrong. You gave me and my daughter shelter when we had none. That took more courage and integrity than any of my VPs have. This is your chance to build a shelter for this entire community. But you have to want it. You have to be ready to fight for it. Maya looked down at her hands, then out the window at the darkened street that led to her dark apartment. She thought of the eviction notice, the chilling silence. Then she thought of Sophia's warm, sleeping form in her bed. A hand up, not a hand out. She looked Leo Vance directly in the eyes. When do I start? What would you have said if you were offered a life-changing opportunity out of the blue? Could you have taken that leap of faith? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Maya's incredible journey. The title, Director, felt like a costume that didn't quite fit. But Maya wore it with a determination forged in the fires of her own struggle. The first few months were a whirlwind of corporate training. She never thought she'd receive budget management, public speaking, strategic planning. She sat in sleek conference rooms at Apex Dynamics, the glass and chrome a world away from the chipped linoleum of her apartment. The stares from Leo's other employees were a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticism. She heard the whispers in the break room. Nepotism project. Leo's charity case. Each word was a tiny dagger, but she remembered the cold of her dark apartment and swallowed the shame. She had been colder. Leo was true to his word. He gave her autonomy, a generous budget, and a small, dedicated team, including the pragmatic David Chen, who had helped with the groceries that first night. David became her rock, translating corporate jargon and navigating bureaucratic hurdles. Together, they launched the Crestview Bridge project from a converted, long-vacant storefront. Maya's vision was simple and born from her own life. Dignity above all. She didn't want a soup kitchen. She designed a food resource center that looked like a small, bright grocery store, where people could shop using a point system. She didn't want vague job training. She partnered with local employers to design courses that taught the exact software and skills they needed, throwing in interview prep, professional attire, and even bus passes. For a few months, it worked. The center buzzed with a cautious optimism. She hired a few people from the neighborhood, seeing the flicker of hope in their eyes when they received their first real paycheck. She started to believe she could actually do this. Then the pushback began. It started online. A local community forum lit up with accusations. Apex is just colonizing Crestview. That Maya Jones is a puppet for a billionaire, selling us out. The comments were brutal, questioning her motives, her intelligence, her very right to represent the community she'd lived in her entire life. The cold knot of fear she'd felt the night Leo knocked returned, now multiplied and given a megaphone. They thought she was an outsider. They thought she was a fraud. The old, familiar voice of insecurity whispered that maybe they were right. David tried to reassure her. It's just noise, Maya. Ignore it. But she couldn't. The criticism festered, making her second-guess every decision. Then, one Tuesday morning, the noise moved from the digital world to her doorstep. She arrived at the center to find a small but vocal group gathered outside, holding hand-painted signs. Jobs for Crestview, not for corporate spies. And we don't need your bridge, we need our voices. At the front of the group was a woman Maya had seen before, Elena Cruz, a fierce local advocate known for her unwavering, and often confrontational, dedication to the neighborhood. Elena's eyes locked with Maya's, burning with a challenge. There she is, Elena called out, her voice cutting through the morning air. The director, come to tell us what's good for us today. Maya's feet felt rooted to the pavement. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat inside, to lock the door, to call security, or even Leo. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. She was being exposed as an imposter. But as she stood there, paralyzed, she saw not just anger in Elena's face, but a profound, familiar frustration. It was the same frustration she had felt her whole life, the feeling of being unheard, of having decisions made about your life by people who didn't have to live with the consequences. Leo's voice echoed in her mind. You have to be ready to fight for it. Fighting didn't mean hiding. It meant confronting. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Maya walked toward the protesters, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stopped a few feet from Elena, ignoring the cameras and the angry murmurs. "You're Elena Cruz," Maya said, her voice surprisingly steady. "And you're the woman who thinks she can fix us with a billionaire's wallet," Elena shot back, crossing her arms. The words stung, but Maya stood her ground. "You're right." A flicker of surprise crossed Elena's face. The crowd quieted slightly. "You're right," Maya repeated louder. "I can't know what it's like to walk in your shoes every day. And I'm probably getting a lot of this wrong. So tell me, what are we getting wrong? What do you need that we're not giving you?" Elena stared at her, disarmed by the concession. "You're making all the decisions," she finally said, her voice still sharp but losing some of its edge. "You sit in your nice office, you talk times at times us in community meetings, but you don't times listen asterisk. This isn't a bridge, it's a one-way street leading right back to apex dynamics." Maya nodded, the path forward suddenly clear and terrifying. It meant giving up control. It meant true vulnerability. "Then let's fix it," Maya said, her decision solidifying as she spoke the words. "I'm creating a community advisory board today. You'll be the co-chair. You have real power, veto power over program changes, hiring decisions, everything. You help me design this. You help me run it." The silence that followed was absolute. Elena was speechless, her defiant posture slackening with shock. "This is your community center," Maya said, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. "It should be run by your community. So, are you in? Or are you just going to stand out here and yell about it?" The gamble was immense. She had just handed her biggest critic the keys to the kingdom. But as she looked at the stunned faces of the protesters, she saw the anger begin to morph into something else. Curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a sliver of hope. Do you think Maya made the right choice by handing power to her biggest critic? What would you have done in her position? Share your thoughts below. The partnership with Elena Cruz was, at first, a tense and gritty dance. Meetings were loud, opinions were blunt, and the sleek corporate furniture in the community center seemed to recoil at the raw, unfiltered passion of the new community advisory board. But slowly, something miraculous happened. The programs got better, sharper. The job training now included a certified welding course after the board identified a local manufacturer desperate for workers. The food market started carrying more culturally specific ingredients, and the childcare co-op implemented flexible hours for shift workers. The center was no longer Apex's project. It was becoming Crestview's heart. For 6 glorious months, the bridge project thrived. The local news even ran a positive feature. Maya allowed herself to believe the fight was over, that they had won. She was wrong. The call came from Leo on a Tuesday. His voice was tight, stripped of its usual calm authority. "Maya, we need to talk. In person. Now." An hour later, she sat across from him in his pristine office, the panoramic city view feeling more like an accusation than a privilege. David Chen was there too, his face grim. "It's the board," Leo began, rubbing his temples. The negative press from the initial protests never fully went away. And now, with shareholder meetings coming up, they're getting pressure. They see the Crestview project as a reputational risk and a financial sinkhole. Maya's blood ran cold. "A sinkhole? We've placed 60 people in jobs in the last quarter alone. We're feeding over 200 families with dignity." "I know," Leo said, his voice heavy. "I've presented the data. But they don't see data. They see headlines and liability. They've voted to pull all funding. Effective at the end of the month." The words hit her like a physical blow. The air left her lungs. The end of the month. That was in 2 weeks. The center, the jobs, the childcare, the hope it would all vanish. The cold darkness of her old apartment seemed to reach out for her from the past. "So that's it?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. "After everything we've built, they just get to decide it's too messy and shut it down?" "There's another option," Leo said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "I won't let them do this. I can't. But I can't fight the entire board and win. So, I'm leaving." Maya and David stared at him, stunned. "I'm resigning from the board. I'll use my personal funds to seed a new independent nonprofit. We can take the bridge project with us." "But Maya," he locked eyes with her, "the budget will be a fraction of what it is now. It will be hard. We'll have to fundraise, apply for grants, make brutal cuts. The salary I can offer you will be less, a lot less. He laid out the bleak numbers. To keep the core programs and her small staff, they would all have to take a staggering 40% pay cut. It meant scaling back her own hard-won stability, returning to a life of careful calculations and constant financial anxiety. David was the first to speak. "I'm in. This is too important to let die." All eyes turned to Maya. She thought of Elena, finally trusting her. She thought of the single mother who had just graduated from the welding program, her eyes shining with pride in a future. She thought of the elderly man who now called the food market his weekly grocery run, his dignity intact. This wasn't about Apex Dynamics anymore. It wasn't even about Leo. It was about them. The community. Her community. A strange calm settled over her. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a ferocious, protective love for what they had built together. "Tell me what I need to do," she said, her voice low and steady. "We're not closing those doors." The next 2 weeks were a brutal marathon of transition. There were painful, tearful conversations with staff who couldn't afford the pay cut and had to leave. Grant applications were filled out in a frantic, coffee-fueled haze. Maya learned the intricate, soul-crushing language of nonprofit finance. She stood before local business owners, her palms sweating, and asked for donations, her voice growing stronger with each pitch. The day the Apex funding officially ended, she gathered the remaining team, a skeleton crew of the most dedicated in the center. The future was uncertain, the budget was terrifying, but the room was filled with a defiant energy. "We're on our own now," Maya told them. Her team, her family looking back at her with unwavering faith. "It's going to be harder than anything we've done before, but this is ours, and no one can take it away from us unless we let them. The fight for survival is just beginning. Would you have the courage to take a massive pay cut to save something you believed in? How do you think Maya will manage to keep the lights on?" Share your support and predictions in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to witness the stunning conclusion of this powerful story. 2 years later, the buzz in the Crestview Community Center was a constant, vibrant hum, the sound of stability, of futures being built. The floors were scuffed from the traffic of hundreds of feet, and the walls were plastered with children's artwork and job postings. It was alive. Maya stood in the middle of it, not as a stranger in a borrowed title, but as its architect. The journey had been grueling. The first year as an independent nonprofit was a knife's edge of near-miss payrolls and frantic fundraising galas. But they had survived. They'd secured state grants, local business sponsorships, and, most importantly, the unwavering support of the community that now owned it completely. Elena Cruz, now her official co-director, walked over, a file in her hand. "The numbers for the state are finalized. We've placed 300 people in full-time jobs this year alone." She smiled, a real, warm smile that had replaced the old defiance. "They want you in Capital City next week to testify before the Education and Workforce Committee." A flutter of nerves, once a familiar storm, now just a whisper. Testify. The word was daunting, but this was no longer about just Crestview. The hearing room was cavernous, all polished wood and imposing microphones. A row of legislators looked down at her, their expressions ranging from bored to skeptical. She adjusted the simple blazer she'd bought with her first real paycheck, her fingers brushing the small, smooth stone she carried in her pocket for courage. Then she began to speak. She didn't quote dry statistics. She told them a story. She spoke of a freezing night, a locked door, and the choice to open it. She spoke of a sick child and a father's desperation. She spoke of the profound, crushing silence of a power shutoff and the shame of an eviction notice. "We so often talk about people in poverty as a problem to be solved," she said, her voice clear and carrying to the back of the room. "But we are not a problem. We are people. And what we need isn't charity that pats us on the head. We need opportunity that respects our dignity. We need a hand up, not a handout." She laid out the Crestview model, the community board, the market-style food center, the employer-tailored training. "The secret isn't a bigger budget. It's trust. It's trusting that the people living the problem have the best ideas for the solution." She finished, her heart pounding. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the committee chair, a stern-looking woman, leaned into her microphone. "Miss Jones, that is the most compelling argument for community-led investment I have heard in 20 years on this committee." 6 months after her testimony, the state passed the Bridge Act, allocating $15 million to fund replicas of the Crestview model in 10 communities across the state. The celebration at the center was electric. Amid the laughter and music, A familiar voice called her name. She turned. Leo stood there, a little older, a little grayer, but with the same quiet intensity. And beside him, Sophia, now a vibrant young girl, beaming. "We saw you on the news," Sophia exclaimed, rushing forward to hug Maya. "You were so brave." Leo's eyes were bright with pride. "You did it, Maya. You really did it." Sophia shyly handed Maya a rolled-up paper. "I made this for you." Maya unrolled it. It was a beautiful, detailed drawing. On one side was a detailed sketch of a door opening on a snowy night. A bridge, strong and elegant, stretched from that doorway, across a river, and connected to a bustling, sunlit city. At the bottom, in careful script, it read, "For Maya, who opened the door and built the bridge." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, blurring the vibrant colors. This was the legacy. Not the funding, not the legislation, but this. A child who saw that a single act of courage could change the world. She looked from the drawing to the thriving center around her, to Elena laughing with David, to the faces of her community. The woman who had been too afraid to answer a knock was now standing at the heart of a bridge she had built, a conduit of hope for countless others. The door had not just let in a man and his daughter that night. It had let in a future, and she had spent every day since making sure it stayed wide open for everyone. This is the end of Maya's journey, but it's just the beginning for the community she built. Her story proves that one act of courage can create a ripple of change that lasts for generations. If this story moved you, share your favorite moment in the comments, like this series, and subscribe for more tales of hope and transformation. What door will you open today?